Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, the spirit of all things. Benin's forests have long been seen as places of hope for believers of the voodoo religion. Many now, though, despair over the rate at which encroaching cities and infrastructure have shrunk the havens. Also, Operation Springbok jumps into action. DR Congolese troops are working alongside UN peacekeepers to stave off armed groups around Goma in the north. Hundreds of thousands have fled since the resumption of fighting in October. And Ivory Coast's ghost children. The number of babies whose births are undeclared appear to be on the rise. This leaves them legally invisible to the state, and that affects their and their families' access to healthcare, education, and housing. But first, in Benin, belief in voodoo dates back an estimated 6,000 years. The religion is rooted in nature, and its followers see forests as the places of worship and sacred homes to the spirits. But these verdant spaces are increasingly being sacrificed on the altar of urbanisation. Laurent Berstecker tells us more.
Making his way through the bushes of the Buezun forests, voodoo priest Gilbert Gakpo uses a silver bell to summon and locate a spirit. He finds it dwelling inside a sacred tree where he performs a traditional ritual to help cleanse his followers.
If you are being targeted by witchcraft or dark magic, you can come here for rituals, and you'll never endure those hardships again.
To this day, voodoo remains deeply anchored in Beninese culture. The religion, which is still practiced by over 10% of the population, is based on the belief that all things, from trees to rocks to animals, have a solar spirit, and it considers forests as sacred places of worship. But these spiritual havens are being wiped out by deforestation amid widespread urbanization, intensive agriculture, and the use of wood for energy and fuel.
People are poor. They can't afford to buy fertilizer or gas for energy. From 2001 to 2012, we noticed that 14% of the country's sacred forests have disappeared.
Torn between demographic pressure and environmental concerns, Benin's government said it's doing what it can to halt deforestation. In 2019, it launched a joint project with the World Bank, aiming to replant some 22,000 hectares of forests and better protect these sacred spaces.
In order for a state to plan and provide services like schools, hospitals, or even roads, it's got to know how many people are likely to use them. And that's why the registration of births and deaths is so important. Well, authorities in Ivory Coast are worried that there's been an uptick in the number of children whose births have never officially been declared. Rough estimates put that at around 35% of the country's children. This makes it harder for them to access fundamental rights. Our team reports.
Maya and her team of volunteers walk through the Boaké market to help mothers whose children do not have a birth certificate. Childbirths in Ivory Coast are largely undeclared. Many parents blame poverty and the lack of time for this. Half of childbirths are not declared on time, and 32% of them never get declared at all.
We didn't have time to register them, so they refused my 2 children in school. I have to register them, but I'm told that without a certificate, they can't take them, so I'm stuck.
A special law now allows parents who register the birth of their children late to do so free with no penalties. However, many young people are still not aware of this change.
It's not free. That's why I do wheelbarrow work. I have to make money to copy my birth certificate.
UNICEF and the foundation of the Ivorian football star Sebastian Haller are organizing a football tournament in several cities in Ivory Coast until December. To participate, one has to have a birth certificate. Each winning team will be invited to Abidjan to meet and spend time with Sebastian.
Every winning team will be invited to Abidjan to meet and spend time with Sebastian. The desire to win and meet this star gave many people the desire to participate.
On the edges of the field where the games are happening, ONESI, the office responsible for national identification in Ivory Coast, takes some of the participants through the registration process. ONESI wants to raise awareness and digitize its registration process to make it easier for parents to register their children.
The Congolese army and UN peacekeepers launched a surprise joint patrol around the province of Goma in DRC's northeast. The plan is to push back against October's outbreak of clashes with M23 rebels following a 6-month lull. The UN's MONUSCO mission first arrived in the country in 1999, but has become increasingly unpopular with Congolese, as many say it's failed to make much tangible progress. Our correspondents went along for a look at this latest operation.
Soldiers are carrying heavy weapons and entrenching themselves in defensive positions. UN troops from the MONUSCO peacekeeping force and the Congolese army are putting on a show of strength.
Now we're on the defensive, but if any armed group dares to cross the line, we'll go on the offensive.
In Kimuke, near the foothills of eastern Congo's Masisi region, UN peacekeepers and Congolese troops have launched a joint operation called Springbok, designed to halt the advance of M23 rebels. Journalists were invited to visit their camp. The troops, who did not specify their number, put on a united front.
Side by side, we fight the civilians and protecting the good people from this countryside.
They are determined, first and foremost, to protect the town of Sake and the city of Goma from a possible rebel offensive.
This position here isn't simply for show. We're here, and if the M23 advances, we're ready to fight.
The joint operation was launched as tensions in the region began to rise, interrupting weeks of calm. In early October, clashes intensified in Masisi, as well as in the nearby areas of Rutshuru and Nyiragongo. The fighting is pitting M23 rebels against the Congolese army and local armed groups, who call themselves patriots. In Goma, civil society members are not convinced by the joint operation. They see the MONUSCO peacekeeping force as failing to put an end to decades of violence perpetrated by armed groups. The Congolese government is also pushing for an accelerated departure of the 14,000 peacekeepers as of next December.
The whole of Rutshuru is occupied by terrorists. MONUSCO should set an example and recover Ritshinga, Rugari or Kalingera, and then the Congolese people will say that for once, MONUSCO is acting in good faith, that it's helped the Republic.
According to the United Nations, the violence has forced over 6 million people to flee their homes in eastern Congo.
Madagascar's frustration over years of power cuts is deepening. There have been years of promises from the National Electricity Company that shortages and rolling blackouts would be addressed, but the breakdowns continue. And that makes running businesses of any size unpredictable, expensive and unprofitable. Our correspondent Gail Borja reports.
This scene has become increasingly common in the poorer neighborhoods of the Malagasy capital. Housewives and young people take to the street, dressed in pajamas, to protest against power cuts. The power cuts, which last 4 hours on end, make earning a living difficult for Mary Florette, a mother of two who works as a seamstress.
I could earn up to 85 euros in 2 weeks, but because of this problem, I can't finish my work, and my income has gone down.
55% of electricity in Madagascar is generated through old power plants, which require enormous amounts of fuel to be imported at a heavy price. Dirama, the state-owned utilities provider, is forced to sell at a loss to supply the population. It is indebted to the tune of 1,500 billion ariares, about 31.5 million euros. Sources inside the company cite poor management, embezzlement and corruption as among the factors that have led to this mess. But the energy minister says gains have been made.
Of course, there are internal issues we must resolve, and we are fighting against all bad practices. But we have built a 20-megawatt solar energy plant, and we have doubled the capacity of the solar plant in Ambatulamp. And we have built a 32-megawatt hydroelectric dam in undeclared.
Despite some progress, 2 private hydroelectric projects aimed at cutting production costs by 2/3 have stalled for years because the government wants to renegotiate future electricity prices. These projects could help reduce power outages in a country where high school students recently sat exams by candlelight. In July 2023, President Andry Rajoelina ordered the energy minister to put an end to the power cut issue within 3 weeks, but the problem remains unresolved.
Well, prior to the outbreak of war in April between Sudan's army and fighters from the RSF paramilitary, the country's second most important export was livestock. Now, that has been strangled by the ongoing violence, further weakening Sudan's strained economy. As regional meat shortages deepen, neighbouring Chad, though, is hoping to step in. Laurent Berstecker with more.
Working to the steady rhythm of carving knives, white-aproned staff meticulously butcher, process and package chunks of red meat. Located in southern Chad, this state-of-the-art facility lies at the heart of a government plan to turn the cattle trading nation into a meat-exporting powerhouse.
They used to slaughter animal on the street. This very unhygienic and very dangerous to their health also. Now we have set up a proper unit where we can put every food safety norms.
As meat importers shift away from war-torn Sudan, Chad is hoping to claim a slice of the lucrative market. In June, the country began exporting packaged meat to Gabon, Egypt, and Nigeria with refrigerated trucks. And with over 100 million heads of cattle, it's confident in its ability to meet growing demand.
There are enough cattle in Chad. You can find all the cattle you want in the same day.
The livestock sector is already a cornerstone of Chad's economy, contributing around 30% of GDP. And while the country seeks to modernize its flagship industry, it's so far refused to introduce intensive breeding.
We are currently using a pastoralist breeding method. We do not want to abandon this traditional way of breeding cattle in Chad.
Banking on meat in order to reshape Chad's economic landscape and maybe even compete with beef heavyweights like India and Brazil.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.